Secretary in charge of Interior and Coordination of National Government in the House, Karanja Kibicho, has been sitting patiently. Thanks so much again for your time, sir. And no, tomorrow, March 28th, you begin border registration. What does that mean?
Thank you very much. I think some time back, His Excellency the President announced that we need to start a fresh registration program for borders. As we are aware, we have in the excess of 2 million motorcycles in this country. Maybe 1.5 of them are actually trading in the border transport industry, and half of them are not registered. It's the only business in the world where you go to a shop, buy a border and live with a client. You don't need a license, you don't need, so they think. But when you go to the law, there is a motorized vehicle, and its operations in the country for transporting human beings is actually regulated by law. And the fact that people have looked the other side doesn't mean there isn't a law that's supposed to be followed. And because we are where we are, and because there's an important industry, when you think of 1.5 million borders carrying, say, an average of 5 people in a day, you're talking of an industry that's transporting 7.5 million people a day or more. And I think as government, we can't ignore that reality. And we cannot also ignore that it is an industry that is very useful to the young people. You've seen what it has done in terms of revolutionizing transport here. If you want your food here, just call and it's brought here in seconds. They are doing great work. But we have also seen that a segment of them are being used, especially by the political class, as militias and people who go ahead of them to cause chaos, a few of them. And therefore, it's become necessary to regulate them. And because we are where we are, His Excellency the President was gracious enough and said, we do not want to disadvantage these young people. Yeah. We are going to waive all the licensing fee, which would, of course, create a big barrier in terms of registration, open up for 60 days, and in fact give a further incentive that the first 200,000 of them will actually get free NHIF cover, because we know when you go to our hospitals, probably all the orthopedic units, 70% are occupied by victims of border accidents. Right. And therefore, tomorrow is the day where we launch. There's free registration, where the borders will go to the 52 Huduma centers across the country. There is a desk there being manned by NTSA officers. We have the NHIF officers. And of course, because to be registered to be a rider is a driver's license, and you need to have been trained how to drive. So we have also brought on board the National Youth Service, so that those ones who have not gone through formal training can go and get trained at the National Youth Service. But that's not the requirement. So you can also get trained in the private institutions, but because we want to make it easy for them, we have quite a number of NYS centers together with TVETs providing this training for borders.
So beyond training and registration, Bwana PS, you talked about regulating this sector, which many have complained criminal elements have managed to get in. Will something like a background check take place? A certificate of good conduct be required? Because it's one thing to get someone's name in the database, but if they have a criminal past, how do you know that they haven't been involved in anything before?
I think the registration process must be made easy, because if we tie it to getting a certificate of good conduct, that takes a bit of time. Remember, from tomorrow, there will be big numbers turning up at the Huduma centers. And what do we capture from them. There's, of course, the basic data. We have a very simple form because we want them to take 5 minutes and leave, go to work. But we'll have captured their biometrics, and we'll have captured their photo and the basic information. Then the rest of the details is backroom operations. He doesn't have to wait there, because even if you have issued this person with a smart driver's license and they end up, after we take the fingerprints to DCI, they end up being criminals, you withdraw the license because you now positively can identify this person. How
will that follow-up be done if you're going to withdraw the license? They're very hard to identify after they leave.
Or to track.
Or to track.
I don't think so, because the problem has been nobody knows all of them. And I must actually correct the impression that's created usually that border borders are criminals. Most of them are good people. Just a few who are criminals, and because they are very loud and they sometimes take law into their hands, it looks like the entire sector has a problem. We have very good border people who have formed themselves into circles, and they have their own self-regulation. And we are encouraging, as part of this registration process, that one of the requirements post the driver's license, if you are going to be in that industry, is you must have a driver's license and you must belong to a circle. Just the same way it happens with the matatus. So that will be an enforcement process post-registration. But you can't enforce until this guy has complied, because other than the government is taking care of these young people, there is no law that had allowed them to drive without a driver's license. But we are where we are. That had been allowed to drive for a very long time. These are our children, and therefore, what do we do to correct moving forward? So that enforcement of how many passengers do you carry, do you have a helmet, do you have a reflector jacket, are you complying with the safety requirements of riding a PSV? All that now, because it's nothing new. There is no new law we are creating. It exists. We're only enforcing. And the enforcement sometimes can be painful, like you saw. And
enforcement has failed. You know, when you think about the task force that was put together in 2019 to look into the sector, they came up with a report with recommendations that were not implemented. 2 years later, we're talking about now this registration exercise that will last for 60 days. Kenyans aren't so sure that this will continue past that period, because you already failed in implementation in the last 2 years and even before that.
You know, it's very easy from a boardroom to talk about this problem as if it's an easy one. We have 1.5 million young Kenyans who are in this industry. And we can't wake up one day and say, since there's someone who probably didn't enforce last year or the year before, then let's shut them. You know, we tried the other day, and you saw almost brought the transport sector to a standstill, because people who are transporting 7.5 million Kenyans to work, you can't ignore them and say that because there is now the will to enforce the law, you are going to crack down and stop all of them. It has to be gradual, and what we are doing is extending an olive branch. Since we are where we are, what do we do to ensure that they comply? The first thing is to ensure that they operate within the law by getting registered. And because registration costs 5,870, that's waived. Then there is further discussion. You know, when you are driving your V8 and a border, the license annual renewal is the same. It's 3,050 for 3 years. So there's a discussion that this border driver's license, the renewal should not be equal to a person who is driving a motor vehicle. So we are negotiating so that it's brought even to 300 shillings per year, which translates to less than 10 shillings per day. So I think to open up incentives that help them, make them feel they are valued, is the only way. But crack down, you know, if you go to our police stations, as we speak, even without crackdown. The kind of litter we have out of motorcycles that were arrested and they are to be kept there as exhibit, we've just filled the entire of our police stores with these motorcycles. So something must give in, and the only way to give in is now the government to provide education and to provide training for these people. Then you can correctly now crack down because you have given them an opportunity. So after the 60 days, the crackdown will be relentless because the government has given an opportunity. If you translate that 5,870 into what it means, it's a lot of money. Yeah. And if you translate the loss of opportunity for the money that will be reduced when they do their annual driver's license renewal, it's a lot of money. We are talking of billions and billions of shillings being given to the industry. But there are also other incentives that were being done when they are doing their fueling and when they are doing their insurance, because that's the next step. These people are not insured, even as they ride on the motorcycles. And when an accident happens, whether it's a third-party accident, you are left on your own, because these people are not insured. So we must have a solution also that makes them cooperate, and that's why we are pushing them to SACCOs. So post this registration, there is no border that will be on the road if they don't belong to a SACCO.
Okay, Bwana PS, before we go to questions from viewers, and there's lots of questions, just to clarify things, registration begins tomorrow in Huduma centers across the country.
The 52 of them, yes.
52 Huduma centers, and it's absolutely free for the first 60 days.
It's free of charge. You walk in, the only thing you need is carry your ID, original ID, carry the KRA PIN, and of course provide a cell phone. I doubt there is anyone who is doing border business who doesn't have a phone, because that's how they are contacted. Yeah. That's it. Then you provide yourself, you avail yourself to an NTSA clerk who will take your fingerprints. There's a form that's digital there. You write nothing. You just transfer your information into an application using the kits that we were using for the previous registrations, and you leave.
That's it.
Within 5 days, you will get the card, the smart driver's card, and when we finish the verification, it will be confirmed. When we finish the backroom operation, remember, we still have to do the DCI stuff, but that, if we insisted, must be a requirement before registration. Then it provides a serious bottleneck, because confirming fingerprints, whether you've been involved in criminal activities, is a long process. So we want to do that as a backroom operation while they are still operating. The ones who are found to be criminals, you deal with them the usual way.
Absolutely. Should we go to questions from viewers?
We have a question from a viewer, Yusti Washira, asking, when is the ministry planning to open scrap metal businesses?
Well, I'll answer, but I was tempted to laugh because we are talking about border.
Scrap metal.
And we move to scrap metal.
Yeah, I think the reason why the ban on scrap metal was put is because of obvious criminal activities that were happening, especially across the energy sector. And I think we've put everything in place, and I'm sure within a month or so, there's something that will be resolved.
Okay. There's a comment here from Mwakungu saying, let's change the strategy here to build a heavy GSU camp in Marsabit. Your thoughts on that, Bwana PS, as we wrap?
I think in terms of deployment, we have deployed sufficient formed units in Marsabit. Having a static camp, of course, is a good thing, but we won't solve that problem because, like we had discussed earlier, the problem is not strictly security.
It's political.
It's political.
Yeah. So why not put sanctions on those political leaders?
Mm-hmm. The camp is because there's no political leader. Just ask yourself, the people you saw in the pictures, where do they get their bullets from? Where do they get their very powerful guns from? Someone must be buying for them.
The warlords out there.
Who is that person? And that person
but this
doesn't
is something
do
intelligence should know, Bwana
True.
PS.
That's correct.
Right, and then act on.
What you're saying is correct. But remember, criminals are pursued every day. And there are a lot of them who are arrested. But you sometimes have a problem of the law, our law as it is. If someone is doing underground funding of these people, you've got to get, even if you know they are doing it, and you present them to a court of law. The burden of proof is on you, but what we continue doing is also engaging them in the back room so that they know their activities are known.
But PS, before we let you go, Huduma number rollout, is that going to happen? Have you passed all the bottlenecks, the courts, the Court of Appeal, everything? Have you overpassed that? Is the rollout going to happen?
Yes, I think we had those court issues. And the last one was concerning the commissioner, the data commissioner, where we was supposed to register compliance with the court, even though the matter was ruled to be applied retrospectively. We complied, nevertheless, but we have also appealed so that we don't set precedents of you being given a ruling, and you are told, even if this ruling is given in November, you are supposed to have complied in April as a principle. But we have complied, and there is nothing now stopping us from rolling out. But I must also say, because you've given me this opportunity about Huduma number, that people have, and we have tried our best to explain, have not really conceptualized what this Huduma project is all about. Huduma project is about telling anybody in this country that the bearer of this face is the owner of the following fingerprints. That's all. Positive identification of a Kenyan, because we know over time our data has been infiltrated and people are having fake IDs, fake passports. How do you clean it up? That's how the Huduma project started. Besides bringing all the data into one basket, the main, because we could as well have done that from a boardroom. We call a computer, bring me data from NHIF, bring me data from so-and-so, and we merge it. But is this person the person? And that is why we had to go to the field and say, bring yourself, we take your photo, we take your thumbprints, and we are sure the owner of this face is also the owner of these fingerprints as positive identification.
The question has always been, this is a duplicate of the existing national IDs. And, we used money, billions of shillings, to go through this exercise. Cards still not in our hands yet.
We have actually been able, remember we collected 38 million data sets. 19 million of them were for grown-ups above 18. We have cleaned up 12 million. Over 10 million have been distributed. 10 million Kenyans have their Huduma card. But because we have a law in Parliament that is awaiting to be passed, actually I think it will be discussed before they break, we cannot declare that Huduma card is an ID, because that law must come into force first. Once we do that, there you go with a digital third generation ID card.
So it replaces the existing national ID? Because
the national ID is the one that remember we have been struggling with this idea of digitizing our national ID, right, so that when you go, and if you have a Huduma card, I want you to go and check today, when we actually start applying it and you appear before a user, you will find somewhere written 1R, 2L. It's saying that for you, bring your thumb, bring your index finger on the left as a form of identification. We are used to the thumb all the time. Now, the Huduma project has made that random, so that when you go there, you don't even know which one you'll be asked for positive identification. If you're in a bank and they positively identify you, then their downstream operations, they are confident that they are dealing with Jeff.
Right.
But as it is, what they do is they will see a guy who looks like Jeff. They're not sure whether it's Jeff, and they are fearful. So what will happen with the database? For example, if you go to a bank, they will query the database. I have fingerprints here. Do they belong to Jeff? The answer will be a yes or a no. But if it's a no, they won't say that those fingerprints are not Jeff's, they are Kibicho's. No, it won't say like that. It will just say it's a no. Then the user processes that information for their downstream operations.
That's a good thing, because a lot of people are trying to be like me, impersonate me. Do you have your Huduma number?
I do not, and that's why I'm wondering when we'll actually have these cards in hand.
When are we going to get these numbers?
Out of the 19 million, what happened is the 12, 13 that have been cleaned up and distributed. The difference is because probably your fingerprints didn't pass, or your photo was not good enough, and therefore you need to come back and pick your fingerprints or take a fresh photo. But because the court had stopped us from that process, then we couldn't come back to you. Now that we've been released, as soon as the law is passed in Parliament, then we will come and say, Jeff, the reason you don't have your Huduma card is because your photo, for example, because you are taking those photos across, it takes a photo and cuts a part of your head. Then we have to come and take another photo. Okay. So that's the difference that we created the 19 million. Okay,
real quick before we let you go, I see the caps reads KK right there. Does that mean, are you running for any kind of office? Are you still running for Governor of Kirinyaga? Like?
No. You know, Jeff, that question I've answered about 1 million times. The people who are civil servants and were supposed to run were resigning on 19th of February. You can see I haven't resigned. But because we are civil servants, wherever we go, people, and we start providing civic education to people, because we must do that. These are our people. We are always suspected that you want to run for an office. Okay. I'm not running for any of those offices.
You stick to what you're good at.
Thank you, Bwana PS, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Well done. Thank you. And thank you, folks. We're going to take a quick break here. We still have sports to go. So stay with us. Keep tweeting at Koinange Jeff.
At Vicky Ruben TV.
At Citizen TV Kenya. The hashtag is Sunday Live. Sunday Live takes a break. We'll be back in a moment.